Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Whitehurst.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Rurale Monte, for hosting this, and to IDA for hosting this. It's a great opportunity for Red Hat and for me. This is a very important market for us. We've made a lot of traction with OSCE here, and it's a great opportunity to come talk a little bit more about open source. I'm going to make the cameraman's job hard because I have to walk around a little bit or I can't talk. We bought a company in Israel last month, and I was in Israel and I found out I must have the same kind of problem that a lot of Israelis have, in that I can't talk unless I use my hands. We were walking down the street and came up to a guy, and we were lost and looking for directions. The guy's holding two big melons walking down the street. And so we say to him, do you know where so-and-so street is? And the guy said, can you hold these? So he puts up and he says, I don't know. So unfortunately, I have to talk with my hands, so I'm going to make the cameraman's job a little tough, but I'll try not to pace too much. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about open source. I really will not make this an advertisement for Red Hat. We are the leaders in open source, and open source around the world, I find even among senior IT executives, is misunderstood. And so I want to spend a while talking about what open source is, what is the power of open source, and why around the world you should care, government should care as we go forward. Let me start off with a simple reason why you should care. $60 billion. $60 billion is a number. It was developed by an independent group called Standish Research. Based on 5 years of study, this is their estimate of the annual license revenue savings companies have benefited from worldwide from using open source. $60 billion. Now, the interesting thing about that $60 billion of open source is, where does that value go? Red Hat is by far the largest open source company and the leader in open source. And I can promise you our revenue is nowhere near $60 billion. This represents true savings that our customers around the world and users of open source around the world have benefited from. And I want to spend the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, walking through why that's true, what it is, because there are multiple components. It's not just about software, it's not just about licensing costs. It's truly a new way of thinking about economics, a new way of acting that fundamentally reduces the cost of technology worldwide. And I'm going to broaden up and say technology worldwide. Open source is one instance, and so I want to walk through a little bit. But to back up a little bit, let me start off spending a few minutes talking about open source specifically and what it is. It is fundamentally a different and better production model in the 21st century for information. What do I mean by that? When software was first developed back in really the 60s, but became truly commercialized as separate from computers and sold separately in the late 70s, there was a problem. Software fundamentally is freely copyable, or the marginal cost to copy software is virtually zero, and it's gone to virtually to zero, right? In the old world, in the world of scarcity, the way economics work in a world of scarcity, that's bad, because how do you sell something that's freely copyable, right? So, I mean, if you think about a traditional economics, 19th century, 20th century economics, things are scarce. You have two streets that cross. You have four corners there that shops can go on. You don't have 5 corners. You don't have 6 corners. You have 4. You want to make something, anything. This bottle of water costs money to create this bottle of water, and it needs to therefore be paid for and sold at a profit or not. That's traditional economics. That's what we all grew up and studied in school. That's what we're all used to, right? So how are we going to make money in a regular 20th century way with software when it's freely copyable? Well, the answer, unfortunately, at the time was thought to be, well, let's make it so you can't copy it, right? Let's use copyright laws. Let's use patent laws
to make it so you can't copy it, right? Therefore, we create scarcity. And now I've written a piece of software, I put it in a box. Even though you could copy it for free, you agree to a license agreement saying you won't. Now it's scarce, right? I can only tell you how many you can make if I hold the license, and I can make it so multiple copies can be sold, right? So what we basically did is took the power around information and the ability to copy that information and bottled it up and locked it up so we could make bits perform the way hard assets have performed for generations in a world of scarcity. The problem with that, well, people like Bill Gates made a lot of money doing that. The problem with that is we locked up the key, most important feature around information, which is information becomes more valuable the more broad it is and the more participative it is. So really back in the late 80s, and probably best popularized by Linus Torvald, I don't think he meant to create a new realm of information. He wanted a cheap operating system to play around with on his computer. He flipped it around the other way and said, hey, let me get some other people to help with this. All right? Let me get some other people to contribute to what I'm doing, and therefore I'll have a better operating system. Well, what he unknowingly did was demonstrate and unleash the power of abundance. Right? The economics of abundance versus the economics of scarcity. What happens when information is freely available, freely copyable, and can ripple out? Well, one thing that happens is it gets more powerful, better, faster, cheaper. And when I say information, I'm even abstracting away from compute. I mean, a couple examples that people know about. Like one, Wikipedia. Right? Think about Wikipedia. Basically, it has far surpassed the total information that's ever been in printed encyclopedias or even online proprietary encyclopedias. Why? Because thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have started to participate and contribute information. And for very little money to create and house basically a small bit of computing, Wikipedia has created the largest content encyclopedia by far that's ever existed by getting people to participate. Facebook, Web 2.0 is a very simple, is a very broad example in information. So Facebook, LinkedIn, you know all the examples now of very, very powerful models that are based on let me have other people contribute information, right? Well, the same is true of computer functionality. So what Linus Torvald did at the start of Linux was he said, the functionality's free. I will give out the functionality for free and let anybody use it however they want. The only rule is if you want to use this and redistribute it, you have to contribute yourself back to the code, right? So in doing so, he created a movement starting around Linux, but now across myriad categories of a fundamentally different, more powerful way to develop software. Now, of course, the downside is Linus Torvald is not Bill Gates. I think, lives a relatively fine life. He works for a nonprofit called the Linux Foundation, but he has not made billions of dollars off of an extraordinary phenomenon. But what he has done is create an extraordinary phenomenon. So for any individual, sharing doesn't necessarily lead to maximizing value today. But for the group more broadly, we've been able to create something dramatically more powerful and profound than something anybody has ever created in functionality. So if you look at Linux today, Linux has cost a fraction of what Windows has cost to develop, is dramatically more stable, is dramatically more secure, and continues to evolve at a dramatically faster rate. That's true category by category in software. This phenomenon continues to march forward. One of my favorite examples of this, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I promised I wouldn't talk much about Red Hat, but it's what I know, so there'll be a couple examples. Red Hat Enterprise Linux is the most secure operating system as certified by the Russian military. There are applications for the Russian military and the Russian government that must run and can only run on Red Hat Enterprise Linux because it is deemed the most secure operating system available. Now, why is it the most secure operating system available? It's because a few years ago, part of participating in open source the NSA and CIA in the United States